Marc is still in the house.
Give me a quick sound check.
Check 1 2, check 1 2, check 1 2.
Marc in the house. Welcome, Nick. How are you doing today?
Hello.
One of the most requested things today, we're doing a studio tour and we're starting here. Here's a little hi-fi corner. The studio guys will be very familiar with Studer Revox stuff. Studer tape recorders have been really famous since the 1950s. And here's a machine that was marketed as a consumer machine, but still lots of studio guys have been using it. It has a handle, it's pretty portable, and you can actually use it for live recordings, and it has been doing lots of great live recordings throughout the 70s, 80s. It's really a collector's item these days. This stuff is just very special. There are these massive, thick knobs. We got a nice tuner here, which we are using to listen to Mara's radio show.
Did you?
Some really nice VU meters and massive buttons. You get the vibe. This stuff has been used in broadcast as well. So all of these were available as both under the Revox brand as well as under the Studer brand, and collectibles. They will go up in prices.
So it gives you happy vibes from the
happy
from
vibes.
the east.
It's
I mean, look at it.
it's
amazing.
I'm not into 80s design, but maybe I'm into
touch
80s
it.
sound.
Maybe touch it.
Okay, I will touch it.
The click. It's like a Mercedes door.
Oh, I can feel something. Okay.
This stuff has been made in Switzerland and in Baden-Württemberg.
Really?
Quality.
Okay, well, if it's done there, it's done properly.
The Beats by Dre headphone. People have been smashing this one. You know why I love it? It's red and it fits the studio.
Of course.
That's a good reason.
It's a great headphone for doing phone calls. Let's switch this up a bit. This is something most of you guys have in your studio. It's the DAW. We are using Logic here, and we got a nice native instrument controller keyboard, which of course works very well together with all the contact libraries and all the, the stuff. Everybody pretty much has it. We're using Logic as a DAW, and this monitor is
It's
curved.
a curvy one.
Curved LG widescreen monitor, and we're using a 30-meter long cable because the actual DAW is almost in a different part of the building. It's completely isolated together with the power supplies of the SSL. We got
the
60 people on the live stream, which is
Nice.
absolutely amazing.
Beautiful. Hello, 60 people.
I blame this on Mara because usually we have 120. I'm just joking. And before we end this, you should call your dog.
Hello, Nelly.
There's another guest in the studio.
She's a studio dog.
Yeah.
She's used to being
She's
around in
absorbing
studios.
some 10K. You can see the fluffy material. we put her next to the singers, and it's absorbing the S's in the vocals.
I thought it was for atmospheric reasons, because girls sing better when they feel
The doggies.
good vibes and everything. So
But then, of course, you see these massive red walls. Tell us a little bit about the acoustic construction in this room.
2 meters 60 deep bass traps
Okay.
filled with rock wool and wooden slats. Absorbs a lot of bass. We have very short bass reverb time in this
Yeah,
room.
basically the problem in most studios is that when you're sitting, for example, in the position here, which is the mixer position, and then you get direct sound from the speakers. Follow me, Mara?
yeah, I'm following.
The sound from the speakers is bouncing to walls, ceiling, and everywhere. You're not only getting the direct sound from the speakers, but you also get the reflection. And then the reflection...
Cancel you out, yeah.
Exactly. The reflection is mixing with the direct sound. Bottom line is you need to hear most of the direct sound, and the most difficult thing in any studio is to shorten the reverb time of the low end.
Exactly.
Just being very techy about it now. That is not reflecting?
Our sweet spot listening position is here.
Yeah?
It will reflect the direct sound, but the direct sound will go.
It will reflect to
to
this
another
position.
diagonal.
Yeah.
And there it doesn't matter anymore.
We treated the backline the same way we treated the front line here. It's absorbing everything.
Oh, that's good.
Next to this speaker, you can see it's maybe a little bit larger than you expected.
And I've got a question about this one. When I'm thinking about the sweet spot, but I don't see the bass.
There's two. Bass is pretty much non-directional. So it spreads around the speaker anyway. It spreads under the console. The more important thing is the mids, which are directional, and the highs.
Did you treat anything down here?
No, there's some fabric in front of it. So
just for the looks.
Those are pretty much the most standard industry mastering speakers. If you look at mastering studios, the most popular mastering speaker is probably this model. The tweeter is made from diamond dust that's formed into the capsule under pressure. The standard material for tweeters would have been aluminium, but then Bowers and Wilkins invented the diamond tweeter, and standard aluminium tweeter would have a resonance frequency between 25 and 28 hertz. Resonance of this material is at 80 hertz.
Definitely out of range.
No audio ever happening up there. Bass, mids, and tweeter are completely isolated from each other. It's a massive construction. You need 3 guys to carry these, or 3 bodybuilding girls would work as well.
I'm not a bodybuilder. Can't you tell?
They're also an industry standard. I don't find near fields super critical. Everybody has his own taste. And we had some later model of Yamaha active speakers, the HS5 and the HS50. We still have them. But then one day Nick switched them out for the vintage pair of NS10 amps. They are helpful. For me personally, most important, and we'll have a quick look at this. We got these old school 1990 portable stereos.
Wow.
You don't have to buy a specific model. I like these Sony ones from the 90s very much. These are pretty much one-way system. They're sounding pretty neutral. There's not much low end going on, but the trick they are doing in a mix is that when you put your basic balance and mix together on one of these devices, you don't walk into the trap that the foundation of your mix is too low for most consumer devices. If you build your mix on a thing like that, it will almost definitely work on a built-in iPhone speaker, iPad, and all those devices people use for listening. So we actually do at least 50% of our work either on this one, and then we have a modern, I would say this is the modern day high quality iPhone speaker dock, also from Bowers and Wilkins. It's the modern day equivalent to what Sony did in the 90s. And between those two, we spend at least 50% of mixing and mastering. And this is where you want to start your mix.
This is the equivalent of going to the car and putting your mix into the car to listen to it there?
Well, actually, the car has a different role these days. I think car stereos these days are the most quality listening situations people have. It's funny because hi-fi is not really a thing because people prefer the convenience of using an iPad or a computer or any of these Apple or Samsung or whatever devices. They prefer the convenience of portable devices and those little speakers and maybe a multi-room system where every room in your house would have a little speaker. They prefer this actually over high-quality audio listening. It's interesting and funny for us audio guys to watch the development, but first of all, this stuff is not too bad. And second of all, it's the market. It's how it's developed and we have to accept it. At the same time, all I'm saying in regards to these portables is that if you start your mix on one of those, it's definitely working on all of the modern day portable devices. We still then go to the bigger speakers and make sure everybody who has a super high-end system is also getting a certain amount of stuff, especially stuff that's going on at 50 hertz or below. If a guy is a huge fan of dance music, he would have his car loaded with huge low-end stuff and he would definitely have no problem playing back 50 hertz, 30 hertz. We absolutely make sure that these guys will have listening pleasure as well, but the difference is what's your foundation?
So hold on, so you're starting, or you suggest that you rather start on a lower device?
If you start on a portable device that doesn't even feature the 50 hertz, you have to make sure from the beginning that the kick drum is knocking, even on a little portable speaker.
So you would even do it maybe on a MacBook Pro in the internal speaker set or something?
I would do it here on this one. I mean, definitely what we're doing here will work on a MacBook speaker, but we still want to make sure. I'm not saying you could mix on any shitty, cheap speaker. That's not the thing. The mix that we're doing here will work on one of those. I still choose the Sony and the Bowers and Wilkins because they are fairly neutral. The MacBook Pro is pretty not neutral. It sounds kind of good, but it's scooping certain frequencies, boosting some stuff, and they make it kind of nice listening experience. Super bright, actually.
Yeah, because I I know some mixers who just suggest to mix on either earpods, the Apple iPod.
It's the same
Because-
principle.
yeah.
You don't know where people discover the music. The kick needs to come through if you walk by a coffee shop that has a little shitty radio.
Yeah.
The mix has to work in every situation. It's just the order in which you do the things. And we go from portable, we start here and go to there.
Yeah.
The other way around, and we get it all the time, that people at home focus on the 50 hertz and make sure the low end is completely booming. And then most of the times it has way too much of it and it's burning some of the energy. If you have too much 40 and 50 hertz, it will still burn out, take all the energy from the weak amp that's inside
No
these portable
way.
things.
Okay.
And then it will distort overall because of frequencies that
Yeah.
are not even featured by the speakers.
Okay.
So, I mean, this is the physical explanation
And the whole
behind
mix
it.
will sound lifeless, taking away the
We
energy.
get it all the time
Yeah.
here. Mixes from bedroom studios at home, and they have too much bass on the big speakers and they distort on the small speakers. The way we work in our master feedback process, first step, make sure your low end is kind of neutral so we can shape it in the mastering process here. Then the guys give us stuff like kick, bass, and the critical stuff in separate stems, and we can then really go back on these different systems.
Okay, so I have a question. So if somebody works in their home studio and they know already that they will send it off to you
Yes.
later.
Yes.
So how do they approach the mix in the best way possible?
Do not mess with any stuff that you know your room can't display. I mean, if you don't have a treated perfect room, pretty sure there will be some errors in your room, probably under 300 hertz, but definitely under 100 hertz. So I would say, especially on the kick drum and bass, for most genres, it's really important that the kick drum is tuned to the key the song is in, and then just leave any bass boost completely alone. If you feel there's not enough bass in your mix, maybe turn up the bass, turn up the kick, or you're not happy with your kick, try a different kick, but try to leave the low end completely neutral. It could be that the frequency you're boosting is not featured in your room, so maybe your room can't show 40 hertz, and then you would boost 40 hertz at 12 dB because you just don't hear it because it's not happening in your room. So just keep it neutral. We can go into detail, and we hear half a dB sometimes at 30, 40 hertz. We can adjust it.
But then also, maybe some people in their home studios don't know which frequencies show or not.
It's always worth putting up a test mic and recording a frequency sweep, but it's very tricky. If you have a lot of bass traps in room treatment,
Yeah.
it's more controllable than before.
Yeah.
But if you don't, then me standing here
Yeah.
and me standing here, the two frequency graphs could look completely different.
Oh, yeah, okay. And
Because
then,
the
yeah.
wavelengths of the reflection changes with every little inch you're moving, and it's completely not under control.
Okay. So it's not even suggestible that you just put up your mic and go through the whole procedure of it.
Definitely worth to learn a bit about the weaknesses of your room.
Yeah,
Definitely.
okay.
The console.
Yeah,
Yes,
which
let's
is
get to the
do
core.
it.
what everybody has been waiting for.
Hold on, just me. Okay, so I just had a moment.
I would say this is the most legendary SSL console ever built. This is a 4000G. It's actually a G+. The difference between a G and a G+, many people say it's the G has a small computer keyboard and the G+ has a wide one, but that's not actually the difference because you could always order the small keyboard. The G+ to G difference is in the actual summing cards, but this goes to geeky already. So this is a 4000. SSL has developed the 4000 in the mid-70s. In the late 70s, there was a 4000B in the beginning. Only a handful were built. And then they brought out the 4000E. This G came out in 87, and this is a 91 model. The 4000E and the 4000G are pretty similar. They're the same consoles, but what happened was that these became the absolute standard of professional music studios back then, which was at a time when the record industry could make a lot of money from selling records first, and then the CD came and it was a huge boost, and it was just the most sensational, overhyped industry until it broke down in about 2002. So these consoles, the one you look at here, back then around $500,000 new price. So
A house, basically.
they sold roughly 2,000 of those in total, which made SSL a huge business, and the most hit records, most Grammy-winning records have been mixed on SSL consoles. After the 4000 came a 9000, The 9000 was designed with high-definition audio and film guys in mind. And for many guys, the 9000 is already too clean, whereas the 4000, if you really push it, you get the nice harmonics and saturation. And
That bite that you were talking about?
the bite in the EQ, definitely. I mean, the 9000 still has a lot of those typical SSL characteristics, and they're both fantastic consoles. I wouldn't say I would choose one over the other. The 4000 is the classic one. These days, it's called the Duality. So they still do analog consoles. They still sell some of those. Also, these days, they sell them in the hundreds, and they used to sell them in the thousands.
Did you get the entire one, or did you get also components?
I got it exactly like you see it here. Pretty much stock 4000 with 48 channels, and this is all original channels. We bought one spare channel, which allows us to swap out a channel or swap, and we bought spare parts. You get stuff on eBay. We bought a couple extra faders and cards. I think I have about 100 of these knobs in new condition that I can switch out.
Yeah.
Because
Do they break ever?
No, but I like stuff to be in perfect cosmetic condition. I like, if you get one of those, you have to really replace on the electronic circuits, you have to replace every capacitor. We did it before we put it in operation.
Okay.
We overhauled the entire console, so it was like new in condition. Pretty much the capacitors are the only parts that are failing. You have to make sure that the pots are in good condition. If these pots start going wrong, then this gets really expensive replacing the pots. And I'm not saying it's a problem if one of the pots fail, you can get them, but they're really expensive. So it's important that you get a console that's in really good condition. I got this from a kids TV station in Paris, and for the last 15 years of its life, they had been using channel 1 and 2 for a Pro Tools system, and the rest was completely unused, and it wasn't really good.
But it looked so good in the studio, probably.
There was a certain point when everything switched from analog to Pro Tools. One day, people would still order a huge SSL console, and the next day they would say, let's just get a Pro Tools and do everything on the screen. And now, of course, these are for the music guys.
And hold on, it does make a difference if you have it in the console or if you have it in a 500 series rack.
In general, the stuff SSL builds these days, they are using modern components. If you look here, it's very tiny components. It's the same components. They're the same values.
Well, I haven't seen those ones inside, so maybe I can't judge.
In the YouTube cut of this, I can blend in some electronic parts to show people what's it about. 24 buses you can use for anything you like. Parallel processing, you can do effect sense, whatever. There's every channel can run two signals. There's a large fader and a small fader, and you can use it whatever way you like. You could treat the signal on a large fader with compression and EQing, and then you can blend in the clean signal with the small fader. We are using the small fader to send to...
So you can do parallel compression, for instance, in just one channel here? No.
You could. I use the first 4 compressors here as parallel compressors and use the routing matrix. This is sending to 3/4, this is sending to 2, and then I use the small fader to send 2 parallel compression buses.
We got the routing section. Preamps.
Compressor, noise gate, expander, filter section, high cut, low cut, 4-band parametric EQ, and it's all switchable, and you can switch the order. You can say compression first or filter first or any kind of order you can do. There's some Q sense which you could use as an effect sense, or if you record live musicians, you could do a live mix for them in this section. So there's a little extra mixer stereo Q sense for mono effect sense. Small fader.
Are those connected to anything in your studio?
We are not using them for reverb or effects, because if I have a vocal, I would send the dry signal to, for example, my vocal channel here. And this is pretty much hardwired. It's the wrong expression, but we always put lead vocals here on the same channels, because when we're mixing, we're used to the same layout, and it's always the same layout we're using here.
Yeah.
So it's convenient, and you know.
And you've got it written down so nicely. It reminds me of the tape.
I wouldn't want to sticky stuff here on the... Yeah. I mean, of course, we got a whole center section that has all kinds of things. Of course, here's some effect returns. We don't use those because we rather use full channels for effect returns. There's the famous SSL bus compressor. We all know it from the plugins.
Yeah, right.
There's a little referencing AB. It is an external input section where pretty much you can bring in reference sources. I mean, back in the day, the studios would have a huge number of stereo tape recorders, cassette recorders. If you record a band, and there's 4 guys in the band, you could connect 4 cassette recorders and after the session give them a quick rough mix. We're not using this one. What we use is the speaker switches. You can connect pretty much any number of speakers, switch back and forth. We have 2 sets in operation here, and the big and the small one we can switch back and forth with this switch. And if you use the portables, we can switch back and forth the 2 portables. And then here's some little section for the mix computer, which if you don't run the classic mix computer, we still have it somewhere here. It's not in operation at the moment, but there are modern alternatives to the old mix computer. So you can connect all of these faders pretty much to a computer and then record the fader movements. So I can run a song, and then when I say, okay, chorus, I need to push drums and bass a little bit, and then whatever I'm doing here, I can be fully recorded to an automation. The modern automations, there's some companies that build these. You can record in your DAW, so it's pretty much fully integrated. This is the VCA section, very important part of any large format.
Can you also write automation in your DAW and send it back to the computer so that it runs it from there?
Yes.
Yeah? That's nice. So it goes both ways.
Yes.
Beautiful.
You could also control your DAW tracks from these faders. This is pretty important because this is where the engineer sits in the center. And because you don't always want to run down to channel 1 or down to 48.
So these are the groups.
They're not audio groups. I mean, you have a little thumb wheel here next to each channel, and you assign it to one of 8 groups. And then, as you can see, all my drums, let me switch these off, you see this, all my drums are connected to this one. So whatever I'm doing here is pretty much a master fader for all of these. They're not audio groups. This fader is just controlling what's happening with this stuff. It keeps the balance from my drums, whatever I assigned this section to this fader. If I mute or operate this fader, this balance stays intact, but the master volume of whatever's assigned to this group, I can move here. So it's for, I can say, bam, let me listen to drums and bass at the same time. Let's solo guitars and do some EQing here, over there. This is some macro mixing. So you would do some details. You would make sure the balance of the drums in itself is right. And then you would end up with a macro kind of control with the VCAs. And then it's just 8 faders you have to deal with. Which
I'm just realizing, how do you ever go back from this to DAW in the box?
Never.
It's
you don't.
Right? And then also the whole grouping and everything, it just...
Mastering projects we do in the DAW, but then still, a lot of times people send us dry lead vocals or rap vocals. We would then do the mastering in the DAW, or maybe use this little thing, which we talk about in a second, but then still run a lead vocal through the SSL channel, use the outboard compressors, so we can mix and match whatever we like. But if we do full mixes, even though it's more setup time in the beginning, we mix every song on the console. It's simply because we get to a better result quicker. We still do some preparation of the signal in the DAW. We would use a linear phase EQ to do some low cuts and use whatever de-essing and tuning. The modern stuff is fantastic for this. And I'm not saying anything against plugins. You can do fantastic mixes with it. But we tend to get better results working in the console for most stuff. There are some exceptions. But then the system is set up in a way here that it all starts in the DAW, but we can send any signal that's in the DAW directly through a digital mix bus. So we can say, let's not use any analog at all directly to digital. We can say, we go through the console, use whatever processing we like to use here. Then we have a little thing that's called the SSL-X rack. To make a long story short, this is a mini version of the SSL 9000. It's using the exact circuits of the SSL 9000 only, Every little pot is one channel and it doesn't have EQs and compression. You could add that in here, but it's a mini summing engine. This sounds super, super clean. So we use it a lot for mastering if we do some analog summing, but we can mix and match everything. We can say we send some stuff through the 9000, some stuff through the 4000, and at the same time still do some stuff directly to digital. Because in the end, what comes out here as an analog signal also goes back to the DAW, because you always end up digital these days. It's always a digital file you have in the end.
But then also when you start mixing, then you just finish one song and then you go to the next. I mean, or do you take photos, or how do you do that to document in between where your knobs were?
We pretty much do whatever we want to do on the console, and then we print the single tracks from analog back into the computer. We make sure that the mix is 90% where we want to have it. And then if we need to do another mix on the console, you could do a recall. There is a technology, and that would require us to get some extra hardware and recall computer. So you could store the stuff here, but I mean, people want to get the mixes, so it's not like it makes actually sense to recall a console. And
and hands down, we don't have the time to recall a whole console for one song.
We do the mix and then send it to the client, and sometimes the client comes back with feedback very quickly. Maybe some small changes, maybe no changes. If the client takes too long for us, so we have to use the console again, most of the times we do the mix, what we want to do on the console, and then print the files back into the computer, and then it's in the computer, and then we can do whatever we like. Just in case, which never happens, we went into the wrong direction on some of the stuff we did on the console. Let's route it again to the console, redo it, and find the new vibe. And it depends on the projects. You know, a lot of the EDM stuff, we use a lot of the summing of the 9K, and then maybe just use the 4000 for the lead vocal, and we can mix and match. This is what's very modern about the studio, that we integrate all type of technologies that are available now. So any vibe, it's here. It's like a huge kitchen, and we have all spices. And
you call it kitchen, they call it candy store, I think.
We have a total of 64 channels of DA and AD, so we can convert 64 channels from digital to analog and back. These 20 channels in these two converters are pretty much hardwired to the X rack. So these are going into this. So we could leave the console, the big console, off and just do some analog summing or mastering projects through these. And then the moment we decide we want to work with the big consoles, these two guys or girls come into play. And this gives us 48 channels, and these 48 are hardwired to the 48 channels of the SSL. Hardwired is the wrong term.
It's all connected to the patch bay here. Every channel of the converter is one patch point here and accessible.
Even the bus compressor that's in the 4000 is completely on the patch bay, and we use the X rack to switch it in. And then, you know, we can mix and match, and sometimes we use the Focusrite Red compressor as a bus compressor. So this is pretty much the center of the entire studio.
You don't have to use it as a bus compressor. You can use it as a drum parallel compressor. We already did that.
The patch bay, as you see it here, was delivered with the console. You couldn't actually get the console without a patch bay. By connecting everything that's in the studio to the patch bay, you get also very, very clean sound. And maybe I should add that we have an extra electrical line only for analog audio in the studio. So every light or whatever computer is switched on here is on a completely different electrical circuit. Analog audio has its own circuit.
Which makes so much sense,
So no dirt coming into the analog audio. Nick is giving us a little introduction into our rack of vintage outboard compressors.
I think we should start here. That's our Dolby unit. You have 8 channels. Here are the Dolby cards. We actually modified them. We bypassed some of the encoding bands, which is basically a multiband compressor. Now we are using them for multiband compression for backing vocals, for example.
What were they developed for if they weren't?
If anybody wants to correct me, put it in the comments or PM me. I think noise is mainly here detectable in the high frequencies. You get the typical on a tape. the signal you record to tape, you would add some treble, so more high frequencies than required. And then when you play it back to tape, you could reduce the treble. And by reducing the treble, you would reduce the noise at the same time. This is how the system, I think, I could be wrong.
That's correct. 8 channels here, 1 channel here. This is our Line 6 Echo Pro, delays and reverbs. Classic Roland SDE 3000 and SPX 90.
The Rev 500 is higher quality than the SPX.
Yeah.
It's one of those multi-effects where you have 100 presets. And the thing is, they sound very different from what you get as far as reverb from the DAWs. As a CD player, high resolution CD player, which is a format Sony pushed for a while, but it didn't really survive.
7.1 audio receiver.
Surround, yes.
Surround receiver.
Do you ever mix in surround?
Not really, we could.
Yeah.
And we have a surround system almost set up. It's already in operation. We have a wireless AirPlay system.
Funny thing is the speakers are integrated in the walls here. So there's a speaker like here. In the middle is one. On this side and on the back, they are coming soon. So
that is fancy.
We made it only for visitors because the sweet spot of the surround system is people standing here, because obviously the main speakers and the NS10s are optimized for the sweet spot here. It's also Bowers & Wilkins speakers, and it's a system, you could also, we could also watch some football here, set up a little home cinema, and then the sweet spot is actually in the middle of the room. So any visitor coming in who wants to play us some music from the phone,
you can do that in 5.1.
In 5 seconds you're going.
Then let's go to the second bucket.
The legends.
There are some classics. The 1178 dual mono compressor, just 2 channels of compression. You can run them in stereo or separate in mono. Revision A 1176 Blue Stripes. I built them by myself.
What do you mean you built them by yourself?
I built them
with his hands.
With my hands and a screwdriver.
Show me your hands again. These. Magic hands.
I really got into the 1176 history, and I sourced almost all the original parts, like transformers, components, and stuff. And there are some do-it-yourself kits. I bought them and replaced the stock components with the original components.
Marc, can I borrow this guy for, compressor?
Yeah, of course.
Of course.
Yeah. That's good.
So, and I did a 100% vintage reissue and a modern version.
In the 50s, they used some completely different technologies to build resistors or capacitors.
Of course, and then the materials are sometimes not even there anymore.
Yeah.
That's what Nick had to source on eBay.
And these, for example, they are using carbon composite resistors, and the modern one uses the modern metal film resistors. The first one I did completely vintage with vintage-only components. The second one, I bought just the modern stuff. And
they do sound different. They do sound similar, but different.
It's the same characteristic, but the modern one are a little bit more hi-fi. The vintage one has a little bit more grit and more dirt. So whatever you need, it's just to have the option.
We use them a lot on lead vocals. They do stuff that's very difficult to get with a plugin. The CLA 76, I absolutely love.
They sound the same at around 5 dB gain reduction, but if you go beyond 5 dB gain reduction, the analog hardware has something the plugins don't have.
So that's the difference. You couldn't do that on a plugin.
Black Phase 1176, that's the revision
D. You got a lot of those.
Yeah, these 2 are completely vintage reissues, and these are some modern recreations.
And what's the difference there?
These are completely vintage components, and these are modern components.
So we got the full family of Universal Audio compressor history here. This is the 11 family, the 78, 76, different revisions.
Exactly.
And then these guys down there, these are different, right?
These are the LA3As. These are optical compressors, solid-state preamp, but compressing with an photoelectrical cell. Same thing, vintage components, modern components, just to have some different sounds. Yeah, sound-wise, we like them on piano and guitars. The 1176 is much faster than the 3A.
Yeah, because of the optical.
Because of the optical part.
How are all these related to the LA2A? Because this is a very familiar compressor as well.
This is a vocal
this is as far as I know, this is some technology Universal Audio bought from this company Teletronics, but it is also a Universal Audio product, right?
Yeah, first there was the 2A, and the 3A, of course, is the solid-state version. version. The LA2A has a tube preamp.
This is the only compressor from the ones we have here that actually uses tubes.
Yeah, same photoelectrical cell for compression. Gain preamp is completely tube. And you can use it as a tube mic pre. It has enough gain. Of course, it sounds different. It sounds a lot more richer and warmer than the...
Can you open this up?
Of course. May take a while.
Wow.
One-to-one recreation of the original LA2A. It looks pretty vintage. The first one was the 1176. Then they bought Teletronics and they had the LA2A. This model, the construction was around 67, I think. And then they continued the history with the black faces and the LA3A as a new version of the... Let me close this again. Here we have some pull tags, EQP, mastering equalizer, super classic equalizer.
Live camera.
It's getting hot. I'm really warmed up right now.
It's been
because of the gear.
An hour almost.
Yeah,
we do a good job.
But then also, it's the gear. Doesn't it get you heated up a bit? No.
No, I'm used to it already.
I get like
hormones racing.
Something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. First equalizer ever built.
Extremely broad curves. So we once measured if you boost them at 30 Hertz, the boost would still go up to 700 Hertz. So even if you don't do anything, if you don't boost any frequency, it's already doing something to the signal.
Do some final shaping, add some presence. Here the setting is very broadband and 3K. And just boost it a little bit and you get some nice presence. Up to 12K. That's related to our tape machines over there. That's just the 8 channels of our 8-track tape machine.
We have a little tape recorder section back here. We're just tape geeks. Upstairs in the workshop we have, I think, 12 Studio Revox tape recorders in addition. This is an 8-track Otari we got very cheap and it's in perfect condition actually. We haven't really used it yet. It's a half-inch 8-track machine. We got a Studio Revox PR99. This, as you can see, looks very similar to the one on the other side. So this is a professional symmetrical XLR version of the one on the other side. Pretty much it's a stereo machine that has been used a lot for mixing, mastering. It's not one of the highest end Studio Revox machines, but they were extremely famously used at radio and TV stations. This back here is a very professional machine, the B67. These were pretty expensive back in the 70s. It's another 1/4-inch mastering machine. We do have some tape, so if requested, we could actually do some tape masters, but it's a very geeky thing. Gives me a warm feeling and reminds me of being a kid in the 70s cutting analog tape.
Now I'm just realizing that it's my Berkeley classmate who just made that comment. So
fantastic!
Hello. Yeah, I
Berkeley
think
in the house.
I think he's from Brazil. So
Bernardo from Brazil.
Yeah. So.
Oh.
So, yeah. He has the sweetest girlfriend too. Anyway, so yeah.
I have a treat for the guys in Brazil. Actually, I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. Actually, we didn't mention the World Cup yet.
That's mean.
No, and I have to say, if Germany doesn't win the World Cup next year, I will drive to the country that wins it and will hand it over. So Brazil, I'm sure, biggest football tradition ever in the world, won 5 World Cups in the history. If they win the World Cup next year, I will put it in my luggage, drive to Brazil and hand it over. That's the little story. Of course, we were hyped about the German win. We were waiting many, many years, and I'm a big football fan, as you can guess.
All right.
That's it, pretty much.
That's it.
Nice job. Thank you, Mara.
Well, thank you for having me.
You did a great job. We just discussed that you're going to be a guest in our podcast many more times and taking care of doing some gear reviews.
Yeah, the ones that I can actually talk about. I mean, the SSL I'm not too familiar with right now. I know a little bit more. But
hopefully a lot of gear will run through your hands in your little home studio, which will be a center of many nice projects and a daily song challenge in the near future. We will talk about this more, so pay attention to this podcast. Also thanks to Nick, who is working as my both assistant, studio manager, and doing a lot of work behind the scenes in my
also
company.
Cuddling Nelly.
Yeah.
He's very good at cuddling.
Yes, doggy,
I'm
come
very
here.
good at
Come on,
cuddling,
Nelly.
yeah.
Come on.
Hello. Hello.
Lazy
She's not
dog.
going anywhere. She just jumped on that chair by herself. It's so high up there.
Yeah.
She's like
good
a
job.
boss.
She's young. She's still young.
Yeah,
So
she's very...
we're gonna let the people go. I hope you enjoyed this. We've been recording this with a whole bunch of cameras. We had a camera that's looking on the SSL down, and this will be a big cutting job, and the result will go up on YouTube as well as on Facebook. And also this whole show will go up as a podcast on the Apple Podcast app. We have another episode already up there. We are committing to doing a regular English podcast in the future, in the near future. This is the second episode, and check out the podcast in your Apple Podcast app. You know, if you subscribe to the podcast, you have a big advantage. You can just listen to everything we talk about here on your commute, in your car. You don't have to go live on Facebook. You can just, on your way to work, listen to us on the train, in the bus, in your car. And if you like what we do here, give us a review, whatever we think we're pretty bad.
Yeah, around 1 to 3 stars.
1 to 3 stars
max.
on iTunes, not more. So give us a review, give us some stars on iTunes, and that will help us to maybe get some more exposure. Our German podcast, funny enough, we were laughing our ass off because people were really not getting it. They voted us on #1 in the German music podcast.
Woo!
Thank you, Mara.
I'm throwing spaghetti, I was going to say. Confetti.
Confetti spaghetti.
All right. I would say
that's it
for today. Good job, guys. Very proud of this fantastic team. Let's do more of it in the future.
Let's do more.
I really enjoyed it. Bernardo, miss you, Mara, he says.
I miss you too.
Fantastic. Come see us here in the studio one day, Bernardo. We have some Brazilian clients. We love them. Great music going on in Brazil. All right. See you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.